Welcome in, everybody. A Tuesday, July 16th edition of Birds 365. Just 7 days out. Johnny Mack from the Philadelphia Eagles reporting for training camp. How you doing on this Tuesday morning, brother?
Week away. Getting too close. I'm getting panicked, Xander. You got to get ready for this kind of stuff. You got to get geared up for this kind of stuff. But I don't have a schedule for this kind of stuff. So I start the show with my typical, come on, Eagles, get your shit together. Get a schedule out.
Get Johnny Mack a schedule, the Philadelphia Eagles. I mean, come on. These guys got plans. They got families. They got places to be, things to do. Eagles always holding out on their schedule for you, Johnny Mack. John, good show planned today. Hour 2, we'll have Bill Colarulo, as we always do on Tuesdays. Excited to talk to Bill. He's optimistic on the Eagles coming into the year. So we'll
optimistic, Bill Colarulo.
Optimistic Bill. Many call him Bill Spadaro. So we'll talk to Bill in hour number 2. He got that nickname during the Philly Sports Power Hour, Johnny.
I did not know that. That is
he is
not
familiar with the
positive nickname.
Yeah, so he's familiar with the Bill Spadaro.
For some people, it's not positive. For others, it's very positive.
So excited to talk to him. We will continue our previews. You did the interior of the defensive line, which is great. Yesterday we broke into our first defensive side of the ball. We did the edge rushers, which I thought was a very good breakdown. We talked about that. So we will get into the interior of the D line today, and then your buddy Ed Kratz is doing some camp storylines, a countdown of the top 10 camp storylines, and the first couple he's released have been very good. So. We will dive into a couple of them here in hour number 1. Like I said, Bill C, he'll be in hour number 2. So good stuff planned. We have an open hour 1. So any good comments in the chat, I will try and get to you guys. I appreciate you all for being here already. Look at this. Tons of comments here early this morning. Say Quads, Eduardo, Joe Ho, Madness, Joe Whip, Stephen McKell, James Carver, Cody K, Charles, Suplex City. What's going on? Mike Fittery. What's going on? James Vanover. What's going on, everybody? Anybody I missed? Sorry I missed you. Appreciate you being here. Johnny Mack, let's go interior D-line, man. We are getting through your previews. We finished up on the offense yesterday, and now we have reached the interior of the D-line. In my opinion, a very exciting position coming into the year. 2 good players out of Georgia, Jordan Davis and Jaylen Carter. Walk us through your open of the preview of the interior defensive line as we approach training camp just a week away.
Yeah, it's going to be a big part of this defense, arguably the biggest. It's pretty evident that Vic Fangio is going to build this foundation of the defense on Jaylen Carter and Jordan Davis. So, there's no more Fletcher Cox to lean on. And, these guys are swimming without life vests now, so to speak. So I think talent-wise, there's no question about either of them for their specific roles. Conditioning has been a big theme in the offseason for the Eagles when it comes to these 2 particular players, with Vic basically saying, not basically, flat out said, they got to be in shape because they're going to play a lot.
Yeah.
And that's where it comes down.
Too, by the way. I mean, Jordan talked about it a lot when he spoke.
Yeah. And that's been a theme with Jordan because of his size and obviously since he got here. And he generally says all the right things, but he looks different this year. He looks slimmer. He looks leaner. He's cut out the zonas, as he says, from his diet. So staying away from the sugary juices and such. Hopefully that helps. With Jaylen, I think it was more of, look, he just didn't play a lot in Georgia. We talked about it a lot, at least play a lot compared to starting players who aren't up by 5 touchdowns all the time and get to come off the field quite a bit. And that changes, obviously, when you go into the NFL. You're not going to have games like that. So you got to be out there. And, I wrote about Fletcher and his history and his snap counts. It's eerily similar as rookies, basically 49% each as rookies. And then Fletch just took off. And, he's played over 800 snaps, I think 5 times, over 900 snaps twice, over 700 snaps 11 times. So the bare minimum you're talking about is 700 plus, and you probably want to get them up to 800 and maybe even 900.
How many snaps did Carter play last year?
Total was in, I can look up the total, it was in the 500s, right around.
Not bad for a rookie year, though. Pretty good number there, but yeah, I mean, he's definitely going up big.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, he's gonna have to go up at least 10 snaps per game, a little bit more than that. And again, that's bottom. Total was 599, so quite a bit. But that, he's got to be up in the 700-800 range, which is another leap. And the issue is, remember, he was great early and he kind of teetered off late. So it's not even just about the number having to go up. It's about effectiveness of those snaps. And obviously he wasn't the same player late in the season as he was earlier in the season. So that's where the conditioning part also factors into it.
Yeah, that's one of the things where I don't know. Last season, I now view in this light that freaking every player, maybe outside of like Devontae Smith, sucked down the stretch last year. Now, I'm not giving him a hall pass. I'm just saying I wonder how much of that went into Jaylen Carter's drop off in productivity. Obviously they made the switch at defensive coordinator as well. So we'll talk more about that. This is a good question, though. We're at the front of the D line here, and I want to go to it early just because it's so relevant to what we're talking about from Madness. Thanks, Madness, for checking in, brother. Last year, Fletcher Cox was supposed to be a complimentary player or extra support, if you will, but he turned out to be the best player we had on defense. Are the Eagles overlooking the loss of Cox? That's a big question, John, coming in here with this interior of the D line room. I mean, look, I'm very high on Jaylen Carter. I'm also high on Jordan Davis, more so than many other fans are. But that's a big loss, man. Fletcher Cox played 700 plus snaps last year. Are we overlooking that loss?
Well, yeah, I mean, he's a great player. It's very similar to Jason. Right. So I don't think anybody's overlooking anything. That's a difficult player to replace, and there was still there was gas left in the tank. I don't think there's any question. Since I'm on PFF looking at the snap numbers, he was 21st in the NFL in interior defensive line in his last season. That's pretty good.
Yeah, that's pretty really
now,
good. What was Jaylen Carter ranked there, by the way?
Well, that's my point to the original point. Fletcher was not the best player on defense. He was maybe the most consistent.
Yeah, he was showed up the most, right?
Jaylen was number 6 overall. Number 6.
Moly,
the only people ahead of Jaylen Carter were Dexter Lawrence, who I always talk about as the best Giants player, not Saquon Barkley. Dexter Lawrence was number 1. Aaron Donald, the greatest of all time, perhaps, was number 2. Milton Williams, all-pro, phenomenal Jets player. If you don't know, number 3. Derek Brown, maybe Carolina's best player. A lot of people don't know. Bad team, but very good player. Was number 4. And Chris Jones was number 5, who everybody knows because he wins the Super Bowl. And that's it. And then it was Jaylen Carter.
That's good company, John.
Yeah. But here's the difference. Of that front group, Aaron Donald was at 916. Milton Williams was at 778. Derek Brown was at 938. Chris Jones was at 947. Dexter was at 709, but he was out for a couple of games. They play major snaps. And that's where Carter's got a spike pretty significantly. By the way, number 7, Alim McNeil from the Detroit Lions, who people might remember. That was the big dust up in the Eagles draft room between Tom Donahoe, not a big dust up, but a dust up between Tom Donahoe and Howie Roseman.
That was when they took Milton,
with Milton Williams. It was Milton Williams versus Alim McNeil, and I think everyone looks at Milton, and this is going to be a big season for Milton Williams, and this ties in, obviously. But Alim McNeil has been really good for Detroit. Different types of players, more of a run stopper, but a very, very good player, Alim McNeil.
Yeah, so maybe Tom Donahoe proven to be right. But, I mean, you say he's a run stopper. Maybe the Eagles didn't want to tap back into that. And this was previous to
That was
Jordan Davis.
previous,
But
yeah.
before Jordan Davis. But, they value
Butterfly effect. They probably don't draft Jordan Davis if they have Alim McNeil.
It's true. So, the whole thing might have looked different had they went that route. But it is interesting to note that Alim McNeil is playing, that good early in his career. Johnny Mac, what else on this defensive tackle room? Jordan Davis is the other big name in the room. He's a misunderstood player. We talk about it all the time here on Birds 365. Explain what your expectations are coming into the season and maybe what everybody else's expectations should be, what they should look like versus what they are.
Well, you should. I would say you should never mention the word sacks ever again when it comes to Jordan Davis. If he gets them, fine. I'd be more concerned about interior push making the quarterback uncomfortable. But basically, it's his job to make it easier for others, and that's not only the linebackers, which is very important to make sure they're clean because they're not going to do a lot of shedding of blocks on their own. Or getting Jaylen Carter and Bryce Huff loose and everybody else on the pass rush because you're taking up two blockers just by the nature of the nose tackle position or the shade technique position. And his goal is to make things easier for others, and I've been talking about it since day one. You can ask Jody Mack. Very esoteric for people to understand for the number 13th overall pick, which is what he was. But if you're looking for 10 sacks, you're never going to get it from Jordan Davis. So I don't know. Maybe start there and forget about that and just focus on the impact of the game. Haloti Ngata is what you want from Haloti Ngata in his prime, not when he was here, because he was here at the end of his career. That's what you want from Jordan Davis.
Does that make sense for this defense? Is that a position that will, if he plays to his potential, how much does that help this defense, Johnny Mac, reach their potential?
Oh, it's huge. You can't even play the scheme without it. If you go back to one of my favorite things is if you go back to 2021 and the first year Nick Sirianni was here, the first year Jonathan Gannon was here, and then moved to 2022, a lot of people thought they were playing a different defense. They weren't, but they didn't have a true nose tackle. So they were getting by with Javon Hargrave and those 50 fronts, those 5-man fronts, right. Who's a pure pass rusher, basically underwhelming to be kind as a run support player. And then also, Hassan Reddick was a big part of it as the overhang player. They didn't have Hassan at the time. They had Jannard Avery, which obviously. So the larger point is Jonathan couldn't do what he wanted to do when it was replicating big scheme. And that's one of the reasons they targeted Jordan Davis. In the draft, it's one of the reasons they targeted Hassan Reddick in free agency because they knew they needed those two particular positions. Basically, when you talk about the Big Fangio scheme, if you want to boil it down, it's the defensive version of +1. We always talk about +1 in the running game and how much more difficult it has it for the defense if the quarterback is an extra part of that running game. You have a +1 advantage. That's why you say it. And but the whole concept of Big Fangio scheme is getting the extra defender in coverage. And to do that, you got to be able to stop the run with lighter boxes. And he's come up with what he calls this gap and a half system. It's not two gapping like old school 3-4 that people always want to bring up. It's a gap and a half, essentially. You got your primary gap, and you're also supposed to flow. But those 5-man fronts are designed to make it difficult for teams to run the football on early downs. And it only works if you have the big nose tackle in the middle who can not only take up blockers and eat up space and keep guys off the linebackers, but be athletic enough to handle a gap and a half. And Jordan Davis has proven he can do that in limited playing time. Now it's got a spike. And you know, you'd also like him to get good enough to where he can play the shade and get that interior push so he can be out there more in the four-man fronts because he's a better player. You know, what else are you going to do? If you think about, say, it's 3rd and 12, you know, Carter's going to be out there, Hupp's going to be out there, Sweat's going to be out there. Who's the 4th guy? Could be Milton. You know, you can do a NASCAR package. You can have a stand-up joker. It could be, you know, one of the edge rushers. You move inside. A lot of teams do that now. Vic has done it in the past. You'll see those looks. But it'd be nice if Jordan Davis could elevate his game to the point where he could be on the field for at least some of those situations. And we'll see how that shakes out.
You think he'll be able to do that, John? Think he has the skill set?
Yeah, I think he has the skill set to push the pocket. Yeah. You know, it's dependent. That's probably a bad example. If it's 3rd and 13, you know, really long, you want your best pass rushers on the field. But if it's 3rd and 6, 3rd and 7, yeah, he's more capable of pushing the pocket than Milton Williams. So it's situational, and he'll be out there at times.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would work a domino effect, right? I mean, if Jordan Davis is crushing 2 blockers, I mean, it's going to free up more lanes for the other guys who are out there, you know, who are speedy and going to get after the passer. So definitely makes sense to me, John. Before we move into some Milton Williams talk, I want to go back real quick to Jaylen Carter and just ask, you know, what are the expectations for him coming into the year? You mentioned double-digit sack yesterday. He's obviously a player that Vic Fangio is building the defense on. I'm high on, you're high on. The whole world is high on him, rightfully so. The guy was a 6th-ranked defensive tackle last year, you know, right around the likes of, you know, Dexter Lawrence and Quinn Williams. These are all pro type of players. What's the expectation for Jaylen Carter from a production standpoint coming into the year?
Everything. I mean, one of the best tackles, defensive tackles in football. And, you know, anything less than being in the conversation with those names we already mentioned is a disappointment. This is one of the most gifted players the Eagles have had in years and years and years. This is their version of A.J. Brown on defense from a gift standpoint. Ed and I did our top 25 Eagles players. We already got him at number 4 overall. If he's not number 1 or number 2 on that list next season, it's a disappointment. He is incredibly gifted. At times, he is unblockable. He is, and people know from listening to me in the lead up to the draft. Look, he would have been the first, maybe the 2nd pick in the draft, depending on, you know.
Yeah, he was arguably the most talented player in that draft.
Yeah. I don't even think it's arguable because the only people you're talking about is the quarterbacks, and he is better than the quarterbacks. But obviously the value of the position pushes it up the board. Yeah, he's different. And I'm not talking that kind of different. Like, you just went through a potential Hall of Famer's career in Fletcher Cox, one of the greatest Eagles defensive players of all time. And that's not hyperbole. He's more gifted than Fletcher Cox.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean he's going to reach those levels because we know some of the off the field stuff. There's a reason he was taken number 9.
Right.
And there's a lot of things as we see with knuckleheads around the league doing stupid shit. And, you know, you wake up every day, if you're a GM in this league, hoping you don't have that text message you don't want to see. So, a lot of things could go wrong with Jaylen Carter, but none of them involve his physical gifts. I mean, I can't remember the last time the Eagles got a player like this who was the best player from a talent standpoint, from a trait standpoint in the draft. The best. And they got him because they were willing to take a gamble, and, they believe in their culture and they believe in their system, and
They believe in Big Dom, who did the scouting on him.
they believe in Big Dom, a bunch of different things. But yeah, people in the league were just shaking their head when they got him. They're like, "Oh my God, how does?" And that's who people would game plan for when it comes to opposing offenses. He's the best player on the Eagles defense by far already.
Yeah.
By far. And he's probably going to be the best player on the Eagles after this season. Best pure football player.
Very exciting times ahead for Jaylen Carter. Hopefully he can reach that potential. And by the way, I mean, the off the field stuff was obviously an issue coming out of college, but we are 1 year deep. We are 1 year out from training camp going into year number 2 for Jaylen Carter. No issues as of now. Nothing off the field. Seems to, I mean, I don't know for you, John, but for me, from what I've heard from the guy, he seems more mature to me. At least he seems like he learned a lesson from obviously what happened at Georgia. I don't know if that's true or not. I'm just telling you just how the player comes off to me. Very high on Jaylen Carter. I think he's going to have a.
Yeah, it's tough to judge those things. He did have the target dust up.
Yeah, that was goofy though.
That was more. It seemed that it was more of his girlfriend than anything else.
Yeah.
But you always have your antenna. I don't know what to say. We talked about a little bit of it. The speeding and the bullshit. It's pervasive at Georgia. It's pervasive in the NFL. Has he learned from it? I don't know. I hope so. That seems to be more of a young people's stupid thing that too many do now. So I hope he stopped it, but I don't know. I don't know if he stopped it.
Yeah, I mean, it's the cars. I mean, look, I'm a car guy. I love cars. I love Mustangs. I love cars. So from the perspective of when you get this type of money, I mean, a lot of these guys go out and they buy these cars that are, I mean, if you're driving a minivan, John, you're not driving 150, but when you go and pick up a new Lamborghini.
Well, we talked about Jordan Addison. He's driving 140 in a Lambo. I mean, Rashee Rice is,
Yeah, so got to be responsible for sure, no doubt about it. Confident though on Jaylen Carter. I hope he, everything like that is in the rear view for him, and he is off and running on a Hall of Fame level of a trajectory. Let's hope he reaches that potential. John, one more question on Jordan Davis before we get into Milton Williams. Jordan Davis is interesting to me because what does this team do? And I know we can't legislate this, but we have to think. I mean, we're doing the show. I got to think about it for a second. If Jordan Davis goes down, God forbid, I don't want to, obviously I'm not saying that he's going to or that we're thinking about, but I got to ask the question. If he goes down, how much different does this defense look?
You saw it in 2021.
You don't have a player
no.
that can do what he does.
No. Saw it in 2021. Just put on people didn't even know they were playing the defense. They thought they changed their defensive scheme. Now, not everyone, but I mean, they're completely different. And they've tried to, they brought in Noah Ellis, who's a big, Christian's brother's big, 340-pound guy. That didn't work out. Now they brought in PJ Mustipher to try
Linval Joseph have anything left in the tank?
Linval?
Isn't he kind of like that type of a player?
Oh, yeah. I mean, Linval, yeah.
He was great when he was here. I know it was a couple years ago now, and he's older, but boy, he was good when he came in that.
Yeah, Linval, I would tell the story. Linval's 35. At the height of his game, you should hear Jason Kelsey talk about Linval Joseph, because he was known as the strongest player in football. I mean, for years. when he was with the Giants originally, and Kelsey had to play him twice a year, hated it. Then he went to Minnesota in free agency, became a Pro Bowl level player. You remember the big interception he had here.
Yeah.
Some people where he huffing and puffing down the field for the touchdown. Yeah, he was a great, great player. He's another. I always bring up Haloti Ngata. Another example of what the Eagles want Jordan Davis to be is Linval Joseph in his prime.
Right.
When he was here, it was solid. Got him through the season when Jordan Davis got hurt, but he wasn't what he was when he was with the Giants and the Vikings. He was a monster. And not just size wise, you couldn't move him.
Right. He's powerful.
Yeah.
That's where Jordan Davis has to get to. He has to get to the point where that's what the offensive lineman he's going up against are saying.
Yeah. So Kelsey would talk about him, and I'm like, he did 39 reps coming out as a 39 to 25 reps coming out back in the day from East Carolina. He had a 450-pound bench press in high school. Clean and jerk records, just unbelievably powerful guy. And in a strong guy league, because the NFL still, at the end of the day, it's, a bunch of strong people. And when they're in awe of a certain guy and how strong he is,
he's that much more powerful than everybody else.
Yeah.
Yep. So we'll see how it plays out with Jordan Davis. Hopefully he can reach that level of a potential as well. We'll talk about some of those guys you mentioned, PJ Mustafers of the world, Moro with Jomo, Marlon Tuipulotu. We'll get into them as well. Let's talk Milton Williams, Johnny Mac. Guy's going to have a bigger role this year. Still waiting on that contract. We don't know whether it's his side that's waiting or the Eagles that are waiting. But coming into a contract year for Milton Williams, I think he's been pretty good. For where he was drafted. I think, was he a third-round pick, John, a couple years ago?
Third round pick.
Third-round pick a few years ago now, so 3 years ago. This will be his fourth season coming into the league. What's your expectation on Milton Williams coming into the year?
I think he's betting on himself, it seems. I think the Eagles are trying to sign him to an extension. I think everybody knows he's a good player. And he sees the opportunity with Fletcher Cox being gone. He's going to get more playing time. How much more, we'll see. I think a lot of that depends on, Jaylen Carter and Jordan Davis's conditioning, as we talked about. Obviously, they're the guys, but Milton's going to be that third guy. And when you talk about those five-man fronts, they basically play a nose tackle and what's called four gap inside technique. He'll be the second one to bookend Jordan Davis with Jaylen Carter. Played 522 snaps last year. So think about the three of them are all sort of together. 599 Carter, 561 Davis, 522 Williams. And you got to come up with 721 extra snaps. And this is not perfect science because the Eagles were on the field too much. They were terrible on third downs. So hopefully those numbers go down a little bit. But 721 reps for Fletcher Cox that got to go elsewhere. And that's not going to be one person.
Right.
It's going to take a village. And, the vast majority is going to come from those three players, obviously.
Yeah, so we'll see what Milton Williams can do this year. I have high expectations for Milton. I'm a Milton guy. I like him. I think he's going to do well in this defense, and we'll see if the bet on himself pays off, whether it's here in Philly or whether it's another team that picks him up after the year. Let's go to the super chat. James said, "Don't read it," but James, I'm going to read it, brother. You sent $10. People forget that these guys have not fully matured like most boys until they're 25, 26, and the issues new NFL players have and will and likely will go up with NIL and CFB, is akin to kids when they finally turn 16 and 21. It's a good point, James Carver. It's, Johnny Mack and I talked a little bit about that yesterday. Yeah, these guys are not all fully matured. I'm not fully matured. I mean, this is the nature of growing up in the world. And these guys are young guys that come into the league, make a lot of money. Good point by you, James. Thanks for being here, brother. Appreciate the super chat. John, any response to James?
Yeah, I mean, it's a big thing for college players to get in a pro program, strength and conditioning program. And coaches will tell you the biggest leap you're going to see for players is typically year 1 to year 2. And that's because they got a year. Not only there are other reasons, just gaining more comfort. Generally you have young people moving to new cities and things like that. So a lot of stuff comes into it. But one of the biggest part from just a pure football perspective is getting in better shape, getting stronger at certain positions, like defensive tackle, like offensive line. And you got these guys with so-called old man strength that have been in the league for years. Linval's one of them. Now he had a lot of strength when he arrived, but then he just kept getting stronger and stronger and stronger. If you remember Justin Smith, old people might remember him from Cincinnati and San Francisco. For years, people would just be in awe of his strength. Not quite as big as Linval, but just he would throw people around. And again, when you're in a strong person league, people take notice of that. And yeah, a big part of it is getting in those pro programs. So he's right. Yeah, people need time to mature physically.
Absolutely, no doubt about it. John,
remember, sorry, Xander.
No, you're good.
Although we joke about college, and especially now, and really people are majoring in football, there is the other stuff that they have to at least pay lip service to when it comes to going to school and things like that. When you get to the pros, that's your job. That's it. That's all you're required to do. Is get in shape to play football. So, guys who take that seriously, TJ Edwards, the perfect example here. If you met TJ Edwards as a rookie versus the day he left the NovaCare complex, completely different guy physically. Completely different guy.
Yeah, absolutely. No doubt about it. John, let's go to this back end of this defensive tackle room, interior D lines. We're previewing now as we prepare for training camp. Everybody just 7 days away from the Philadelphia Eagles reporting to training camp. Already 36 minutes into the show. Show was flying by this morning. Thanks, everybody, for being here. Tons of watchers. Make sure you guys drop a like on the show. If you're enjoying the show, we appreciate you being here on Birds 365. Again, just 7 days away till the Eagles report to training camp. John, let's go to that depth. Marlon Tuipulotu is a name. Moro Ajomo is a name. PJ Mustapher is a name. Who do you like on the back end of this defensive tackle and this interior D line? Who do you think will have a role on this team, and who should we be watching as we come into training camp?
Well, it's not as good as it has been. It's typically a position that the Eagles value and pour a lot of assets into, and they certainly have. I mean, they went back-to-back defensive tackle in the draft in the first round, number 13 than number 9. So again, different positions, but Milton Williams is a 3rd-round pick. Fletcher, of course, was a first-round pick and delivered for many years. So they always pour assets into this particular position. A little bit more uncertainty. Marlon is entering a contract year as well as Milton. They were in the same draft class. Moro in his 2nd year. They're kind of 2 different players. So you generally want at least a 4-man rotation, and that'll be the battle for the 4th spot. And it's sort of like, and they might sort of piecemeal it because Marlon is is a bigger player, more of a run stuffer. Morrow is a little bit undersized, more of a pass rusher potential type. So they might kind of piecemeal it and have those guys like a baseball platoon for that 4 spot. And then the others, PJ Mustipher, as you mentioned, is trying to provide traits. Look, he's not going to be as effective as Jordan Davis, but he's trying to provide similar traits. So if Jordan Davis does miss a game or two, you don't have to go away from how you play because you have a player that can give you at least similar looks. That would be sort of his fit. And then Gabe Hall's interesting for a couple reasons. One, GMs have egos. Howie's no different, and they always like to keep at least one undrafted guy. And he's probably the most talented undrafted guy. Most had him as a draftable commodity. Kind of a tweener, though. He's 6'6", 290-ish. More like an old school 3-4 defensive end. Maybe the Eagles can figure out how to use that. Maybe if anybody can do it, maybe Vic Fangio can do it. And then Thomas Booker's a guy that people don't talk about much. He was here last year on the practice squad. He's a bigger guy as well. So, chance for him in that run stuffer role would be, the backup to Jordan Davis as well. So they're trying to find a player who can be that type of backup, but I'm not sure they have it.
Yeah, so we'll see how it all plays out. A couple guys in the chat like more with Jomo. I think he's going to be a good player. We haven't seen much from him, but he didn't play limited snaps last year. We'll see how good the depth can be at this defensive tackle at the interior of the defensive line position. Good breakdown there, Johnny Mack. Any final touches? Any final thoughts on the interior of the D line preview as we were just 7 days out from camp?
Just that, people, if they don't know how important Fletcher Cox was, they're probably going to find out this year, because to have that kind of consistency for over a decade is pretty impressive. Maybe Jaylen Carter takes off and people will forget it, but you just don't feel as comfortable because he's not there. And I'm sure the Eagles feel the same way. They're hopeful that Milton has a career year and Jaylen takes that next step. And, Moro Jomo can, as some people are excited about, can turn into a contributor. But, as Howie often says, hope is not a strategy. Be nice to have Fletcher Cox, but he's a rancher now. And he drops by when he's not in Texas, but he's not coming back. So he's
Probably
not coming through that door.
Probably still has his place in Jersey. I know Jersey's a place you can get a bunch of land, so I know they all like living over there. That's where Carson Wentz used to live and hunt too. So maybe Fletcher will still be local to the area, show face at a couple games this year. We'll see. John, one more question on the interior of the D line. You think they're going to add any names? You think they're comfortable with the amount of bodies and the guys they have in the room?
I think that depends. I don't think they're going to add any names immediately.
Right.
That's the type of situation that's always on the table. That's what happened. That's why Linval got here and Ndamukong Suh got here. Basically, what happened, if you remember, Jordan Davis got hurt.
Right.
And they gave Marvin Wilson at the time a chance. It was the game in Houston, and it was not good. The Phillies were playing the World Series. That was wild. The Eagles were playing the Texans.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Phillies were in the World Series against the Astros. I think that's the night the Astros clinched, I believe. And everybody was watching it in the locker room. It's pretty. I don't know if they clinched, but they lost the game. Well, the Phillies did. The Astros won it, and the fans were excited down there. The Eagles won the game, but it was an ugly game. If you remember, the Texans weren't very good at the time.
Yeah, no.
But the Eagles really struggled without Jordan Davis stopping the run. And, Howie got on the phone pretty quickly.
Yep. So we'll see how it plays out. Pretty good. I mean, pretty good breakdown of the D line, of the interior of the D line there. Very optimistic, obviously, on Jaylen Carter and Jordan Davis. I think both of them are going to have take a big step forward. And we'll see how Milton and the rest of the crew contribute this year. Johnny Mac, let's get to our first commercial break. Good first segment there. As our previews continue on, just 7 days out, everybody. 7 days until the 2024 season is underway. I mean, not fully, but once they get to training camp, it's like it's off and running, basically. Time to put 23 in the rear view and move on to 2024. So it can't come soon enough, just 7 days out for important at training camp. Thanks, everybody, for being here. Make sure you guys drop a like on the show. Stay tuned. Birds 365 will come right back. I got some good questions for Johnny Mac. Our buddy Ed Kratz over at SI.com with John McMullen has done some good pieces as he prepares for training camp in 7 days. So we'll dive into a couple of them, and then we'll have Bill Colarulo coming up in hour number 2. So stay tuned, everybody. Birds 365 will be right back.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.